Welcome to how to take underwater portraits of fish. I absolutely love taking photos of fish. They are so charismatic, full of character, and just an absolute pleasure to shoot. It all requires a certain degree of patience and knowing what to do with your camera and how to treat the fish, how to photograph them, the angles to use and where to focus. So in this YouTube video, I'm going to tell you exactly all of those things and more so that you can come back from your next dive with absolutely beautiful photos of fish. So what exactly is a fish portrait? A fish portrait is a photo of a fish showing its personality, its character, its quirks. But the fish must also be the main subject of the image. If you're using a compact camera or an Olympus TG, you don't really need any extra equipment. However, if you want, for a compact camera, you can also add a diopter, especially if your fish is really small. So if you're going to be using a diopter to photograph smaller fish, just remember that your working distance, the distance between the front of your diopter and your fish, becomes much smaller. This is going to make your fish much bigger in the frame. But if you're shooting a timid character or a timid fish, you're going to struggle getting close enough to take a picture of him, as he's going to swim away before you can press the shutter. So fish portraits are much easier to take if they're a bigger fish, and you can have a working distance that is slightly larger that doesn't frighten the fish away. So that's compact cameras and TGs. Now if you're using a DSLR or a mirrorless, you can use a 60mm macro lens or a 100mm macro lens or the equivalent. So with a Sony it could be a 50mm macro or a 90mm macro. A Nikon could be your 60 or your 105, and your Canon, if you're on a crop sensor, it could be your 60 or your 100. If you're using a full frame mirrorless or DSLR with a Canon, you would be using your 100mm macro lens. A fisheye is great for taking fish portraits with a wide angle lens, because you can actually get much closer with a fisheye than you can with a rectilinear lens. So if you're going to be taking fish portraits with a wide angle, which is great because then you can get some of the scenery into your frame, I would definitely look at using a fisheye lens. Crop sensor cameras, the Tokina 10-17 is a brilliant lens, and for full frame cameras, your 8-15 circular fisheye is absolutely brilliant too. So those are your lenses that I would recommend to use when you're taking fish portraits. Also for the wide angle, I would definitely look at using a mini dome port that you can do close focus wide angle, which means your working distance will be so much smaller, but you'll still be able to incorporate some background, some scenery into the image and show a sense of place. So those are my suggestions with regards to macro and wide angle lenses. So if you're using a compact, you can also use a wet wide angle lens, and that will give you a sense of space and sense of where the fish is living and his surroundings. But always remember, your fish is your subject. You're making a fish portrait. You're not just taking a picture of the reef with a fish on. So make sure that you focus on your fish and you make the fish your focal point. My recommendation, if you don't have a strobe, is to use a narrow beam torch with a beam angle of between 5 and 10 millimeters in diameter. It will become wider the further away it is from your subject. That gives you a nice beam of light that is going to light up your fish and not too much of the reef around it, so you'll still be able to get a lovely black background. If you are going to use a video light, try and get one that has about 1200 plus lumen. Anything below that is going to be a little bit dim. The further your fish is away from you, the less you're going to be able to light it. So always try to get maximum 30 to 50 centimeters away from your subject if you're using a torch or a video light to light it up. You can also use 2 video lights if you want, but then you will be lighting up your whole scene. It will give you some nice even lighting as well. But my first choice always is strobes, because the bright, constant light of video lights and torches tends to frighten most fish away. So where do you focus when you're taking a picture of a fish? On its eyes, of course. The eyes are the windows to the soul. They are what makes connection with the viewer. It is the first thing that a person looking at a photograph is going to look at. And fish eyes and fish faces can look so much like humans, and I think that's what causes the connection. So if your fish has a particularly human-looking face, try to bring out that character. It could be a grumpy old man, could be an inquisitive child, it could be a cheeky kid. If you can see that in your fish, try to capture it in your photo. A snoot is a great way to separate your fish from a messy background. Another great way of taking photos of fish is shallow depth of field, where just the fish or its face is in focus, but the background and some of the foreground as well is completely blurred out. So that means the eye is drawn to the fish, the viewer looks at the fish, and the background is a beautiful soft bokeh blur, which can be very, very beautiful. What's really important when you're taking photos like this is that you need to get the focus spot on, and you need to focus on the eyes. If you don't, you can have the most beautiful bokeh background and the fish's mouth in focus, but not his eyes. And really you want to get the fish's eyes tack sharp in every photo, whether you're using a good depth of field, everything in focus, or just a shallow depth of field. You need to make sure that you get the fish's eyes in focus. Another thing to think about is some of the fish have eyes on either side of their head. So what you can do is you can take a 45-degree photo of the fish where just the one eye is in focus and maybe just the eyeball of the other eye can be seen in the frame, and it can be out of focus. So you can try different angles. I love to do face on full frontals of the fish where both eyes are in focus. Sometimes, however, the eyes are quite far set back from the mouth. So you may need to make sure that the f-stop or the depth of field that you're using is great enough to get the eyes and the mouth in focus. One thing you shouldn't do, and what I see quite often, is people taking photos downwards of fish, so the fish tends to blend into the background. So if you're taking a photo of fish, always try to get eye level with the fish and point your camera slightly upwards so that you have the water column behind your fish if possible, or the reef a little bit further away, which you can blur out with a shallow depth of field, and try and get the fish just as the star of the show and all the background just melting away. Another great tip that I can give you is when you're trying to shoot a timid fish is to swim around and pretend that you haven't seen him, because often they're watching you to see whether you're a threat or not. So if you just swim along and swim around in their environment, they'll soon get used to you. And what you can do then is you can get closer and closer and closer, and they'll see that you're not a threat to them. And eventually what you can do is you can actually turn around and point your camera at that fish. And hopefully by that stage, he will have got used to you in his environment and will be relaxed and rested enough for you to take some good pictures without frightening him away. So hopefully my points have given you some good tips and some good ideas on how you can go diving and take beautiful fish portraits. Just remember, bring out those characters, the quirkiness, the grumpiness, the cheekiness of those fish. And that way you can get a really, really great fish portrait and show all your friends and family and people on Instagram or on Facebook exactly what beautiful things we see under the ocean. With all these tips, you'll be on your way to taking beautiful portraits of fish. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more fishy, nudibranch, underwater photography and scuba diving tips and tricks. Thanks for watching and happy bubbles. Bye.